What if the man everyone dismisses, the one scrubbing floors with his head down, is the only one you'd want by your side when the world falls apart? Kaelen pushed the mop across the gleaming lobby of Innovatech Tower, the slosh of grey water the only sound in the cavernous space. His reflection was a ghost in the polished marble, a tired man in a faded blue jumpsuit, shoulders slumped not from the work, but from the weight of a life he kept buried. He was invisible, and that was the point. Safety was found in anonymity. It was a lesson his past had taught him in blood and tears. A sharp, mocking laugh cut through the quiet. "Hey, mopman. You missed a spot." Brent, a team lead with a slick suit and an even slicker smile, pointed a gleaming leather shoe at a non-existent smudge. His cronies snickered, their eyes filled with the casual cruelty of those who have never known hardship. Kaelen didn't look up. He just nodded, his jaw tight, and pushed the mop over the clean floor again. "That's it," Brent sneered, leaning against a pillar. "Good boy. Know your place." His place. It was a phrase Kaelen heard in his sleep. His place was a cramped one-bedroom apartment that smelled of bleach and his daughter's favorite cinnamon toast. His place was packing her lunch every morning, braiding her hair with hands that once held weapons of terrifying precision. His place was beside 7-year-old Rosie, reading her stories about dragons and heroes, trying to be the hero she believed him to be, even if the world only saw a janitor. Serafina, a software engineer with eyes that missed nothing, watched the exchange from the coffee bar. She felt a familiar pang of disgust for Brent and a confusing flicker of sympathy for the janitor. He never reacted, never defended himself. He just absorbed the taunts with a stillness that was almost unnatural. It wasn't weakness, she was starting to realize. It was a kind of control she couldn't quite decipher. Later that day, as the afternoon sun slanted through the massive windows, Kaelen was on his knees, meticulously cleaning a scuff mark near the elevators. He heard a small sniffle and looked up to see Rosie, who had been dropped off by the school bus and was waiting for his shift to end in the designated family area. She was clutching a drawing, her lower lip trembling. "What's wrong, little star?" he asked softly, his voice a low rumble that was reserved only for her. "Billy said my drawing of a rocket ship was silly," she whispered, tears welling in her bright eyes. "He said girls can't build rockets." Kaelen gently took the paper. It was a vibrant, chaotic drawing of a silver ship breathing fire. He smiled, a genuine, soul-deep smile that transformed his weary face. "Well, Billy doesn't know what he's talking about," he said, his thumb brushing away a tear on her cheek. "This isn't just a rocket ship. This is a Starhopper 5000. See this part here?" He pointed to a crayon squiggle. "That's the hyperdrive converter. And this is the anti-gravity stabilizer. You didn't just draw a rocket, Rosie. You designed an interstellar vessel." Rosie's eyes widened, her sadness melting away. "Really?" "Absolutely," he said with utter conviction. "Don't ever let anyone tell you what you can or can't build." From across the lobby, Serafina saw it all. She saw the shift from the stoic, invisible janitor to the fiercely loving father. She saw the light in his eyes as he spoke to his daughter, a light so brilliant it seemed out of place on his tired face. It was a glimpse behind the curtain, a hint of a man far more complex than the one Brent and his ilk chose to see. That evening, a torrential downpour lashed against the glass walls of the tower. Serafina's car wouldn't start, the engine giving a pathetic click. Cursing under her breath, she was about to call for a ride when she saw a figure in the gloom of the parking garage. It was Kaelen, his shift over, holding a large umbrella over Rosie as he walked toward a battered old sedan. He saw her predicament, hesitated for a moment, and then walked over. "Car trouble?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Dead battery, I think," she said, frustrated. "Just my luck." Without another word, he settled Rosie into his car with a book, then came back and popped her hood. His movements were efficient, sure. He didn't fumble or guess. He diagnosed the problem in seconds, a corroded terminal. From a small, meticulously organized toolkit in his trunk, he produced a wire brush and a wrench. In less than 5 minutes, he had cleaned the connection and tightened it. "Try it now," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. She turned the key, and the engine roared to life. She stared at him, bewildered. "How did you?" "Thank you. I don't know what to say, just happy to help," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. He started to turn away. "Wait," she called out. "Let me at least buy you and your daughter dinner." Please, he looked at Rosie, then back at her. For the first time, he met her gaze directly, and she felt a jolt. His eyes were a deep, stormy gray, and in their depths, she saw an intelligence and weariness that went far beyond mopping floors. We'd like that, he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. The three of them sat in a small diner, the air warm with the smell of coffee and fries. Rosie chattered happily about her starhopper, and Kaelen listened with rapt attention. Serafina found herself watching him, fascinated. He spoke little about himself, skillfully deflecting personal questions by turning them back to her or focusing on Rosie. Yet, she learned more from what he didn't say. She learned it in the way he scanned the room when they entered, the way he positioned himself with his back to the wall, the way his body subtly shielded Rosie from the main doorway. They were small things, almost imperceptible, but they spoke of a deeply ingrained instinct for protection. "You're very observant," she commented, testing the waters. He just shrugged. A dad has to be, but it was more than that. It was practice. It was training. As they were leaving, Brent walked in with a group from the office. His eyes landed on their small group, and a malicious grin spread across his face. Well, he drawled, his voice loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "Look what we have here." Serafina, slumming it with the help. "I didn't know you had a charity for single dads." Kaelen's body went rigid. He gently pushed Rosie behind him, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Leave it alone, Brent," Serafina said, her voice sharp with anger. "Oh, I'm just surprised," Brent continued, stepping closer. "What's he going to pay with?" "Coupons he found in the trash." The insult hung in the air, thick and ugly. Kaelen's eyes turned cold, the warmth from dinner completely gone. He looked at Brent, and for a split second, the facade of the weary janitor slipped. What looked back at Brent was something hard, something ancient and dangerous. It was a look that assessed threats, calculated trajectories, and decided fates. Brent, for all his bluster, took an involuntary step back, a flicker of unease in his eyes. He couldn't understand it, but he felt it, a primal fear. Kaelen said nothing. He simply paid the bill with cash, took Rosie's hand, and walked out, Serafina following in stunned silence. The mask was back in place, but she had seen what was beneath. The next week was tense. Brent avoided Kaelen, but his mockery turned vicious behind his back, spreading rumors. Serafina found herself defending Kaelen, much to her colleagues' confusion. She started bringing him coffee in the mornings, and they would talk for a few minutes before the office filled up. She learned about his late wife, how she died in a tragic accident years ago, leaving him to raise Rosie alone. He spoke of her with a profound sadness that was still raw. Each conversation was like finding another piece of a puzzle she couldn't solve. Then came the night of the corporate gala. It was a lavish affair, but Kaelen was there only to clean up afterward. The building was nearly empty, save for a few stragglers and the cleaning crew. He was working his way down the executive corridor when a door to a small conference room flew open. A young woman, a junior analyst named Clara, stumbled out, her dress torn at the shoulder. Her face was pale, a dark bruise forming on her cheek. She saw Kaelen and her eyes widened in desperation. Behind her, Brent emerged, his face flushed with rage and alcohol. He grabbed her arm. "Where do you think you're going?" he snarled. "We're not finished, let go of me." Clara cried, trying to pull away. Kaelen set his cleaning cart aside, the wheels making a soft, deliberate click on the marble floor. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move quickly. He simply became a presence, a solid, unmovable object in Brent's path. "She said to let her go," Kaelen stated, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Brent laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Mind your own business, mopman. This is executive-level business. Way above your pay grade." He shoved Clara against the wall. She gasped in pain. And that's when she saw it. The glint of metal in Brent's hand. It was a small, wicked-looking letter opener, but he held it like a dagger. Fear choked her. She locked eyes with Kaelen, her voice a ragged, terrified whisper. "Help me, he has a weapon." In that instant, everything changed. The world seemed to slow down. The weary janitor, the mocked single dad, the invisible man, he evaporated. In his place stood someone else entirely. Kaelen's posture straightened, a subtle shift that added inches to his height. The slump in his shoulders vanished, replaced by a coiled readiness. His eyes, which were usually downcast or soft with paternal love, became chips of ice. They were the eyes of a predator, a hunter, a man who had walked through hell and come out the other side. Brent saw the change and faltered, confused. What's with the tough guy act? He lunged toward Clara again, raising the letter opener. He never made it. Kaelen moved in a blur of motion that defied logic. It wasn't a brawl, it was a symphony of violence, precise and devastatingly effective. His left hand shot out, not to block the weapon, but to grip Brent's wrist, his fingers finding the exact pressure points to render the hand useless. A sharp twist, accompanied by a sickening pop, and the letter opener clattered to the floor as Brent screamed in agony, his shoulder dislocated. Kaelen's other hand chopped down on the side of Brent's neck, hitting the vagus nerve with surgical accuracy. Brent's eyes rolled back in his head, and his legs buckled. Kaelen caught him before he hit the ground, lowering him silently to the floor, completely unconscious. The entire confrontation lasted less than 3 seconds. It was silent, efficient, and terrifyingly final. Clara stared, her hand over her mouth, her fear of Brent replaced by a profound awe of her rescuer. Kaelen stood over Brent's motionless form, his breathing even, his expression a cold, impassive mask. Then he turned to her, and the ice in his eyes thawed slightly. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice returning to its normal, quiet tone. She could only nod, speechless. At that moment, a door at the end of the hall opened. Serafina stepped out, having stayed late to finish a project. She took in the scene at a glance: Clara, bruised and shaking, Brent, unconscious on the floor, and Kaelen, standing over him like a sentinel. Her mind struggled to connect the men who had fixed her car and talked about rocket ships with the lethal force she was witnessing. "Kaelen," she breathed, her voice filled with disbelief. Before he could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the hall. Security. Kaelen knelt, checked Brent's pulse, and then stood up to face them, his hands held loosely at his sides. He didn't run. He didn't explain. He simply waited. The aftermath was chaos. Brent was taken to the hospital, screaming about lawsuits and assault. Clara, finding her voice, told the head of security and the responding officers exactly what had happened: the harassment, the blackmail, the assault. The security footage corroborated her story perfectly, showing Brent's aggression and Kaelen's impossibly swift, defensive actions. The police were impressed. The head of security was dumbfounded. But the real shock came the next morning. Kaelen was called not to HR, but to the penthouse office of Mr. Sterling, the enigmatic CEO of Innovatech. Serafina waited anxiously outside, having given her own statement about Brent's history of bullying. When Kaelen walked into the opulent office, Mr. Sterling was standing by the window, looking out over the city. He was a man in his 60s with the rigid posture of a military man. He turned, and his eyes, sharp and discerning, studied Kaelen for a long moment. "The security report was impressive," Sterling said, his voice a low baritone. "The disarm technique, the nerve strike. That's not something a janitor learns on the weekend. That's Tier 1 operator standard." Specifically, Delta. Kaelen remained silent, his face unreadable. Sterling smiled grimly. "I was a colonel in Army intelligence for 20 years. I reviewed the file of every operator we ever worked with. I never forget a face, or a code name. It's good to see you again." Ghost. The name hung in the air, a phantom from another life. Kaelen's jaw clenched. "That name is dead, is it?" Sterling countered, walking to his desk. He pulled up a file on his monitor. It was Kaelen's, sealed and classified. Decorated squad leader. Ghost of the Sahel. The men they sent when things went sideways from Damascus to Bogota. Then, 5 years ago, a mission in Eastern Europe goes bad. Your cover is blown. Retaliation comes for your family. A car bomb. Your wife, she doesn't make it. You and your daughter disappear. Officially, you're listed as Kia. Kaelen's voice was rough with emotion. "I buried that man to keep my daughter safe. I took this job, this life, so no one would ever look for us again. So she could just be a kid, and you've done it," Sterling said, his tone softening with respect. "But a man like you can't hide forever. Your instincts are too sharp. You see trouble, you help. It's who you are, he gestured to a chair. Brent is fired, and he's facing multiple felony charges. Clara is safe. But this incident has exposed a weakness in my company's security. I need someone to fix it. Someone with your unique perspective. I'm not asking the ghost to come back. I'm asking Kaelen, the man who protects people, to be my new head of corporate security. Name your price. Your daughter will have the best schools, the best healthcare. Total protection. You won't have to hide anymore. Kaelen thought of Rosie, of the constant fear he lived with, of the shame he endured to keep her safe. This was a chance to give her everything, to be the man she deserved without living in the shadows. On one condition, Kaelen said, his voice firm. I do it my way. Sterling extended his hand. I wouldn't have it any other way. When Kaelen walked out of the office, Serafina was still there. She looked at him, her eyes full of questions. They didn't fire you. They promoted me, he said simply. He took a deep breath, the first truly free breath he'd taken in 5 years. My name is Kaelen. And there's a lot I need to tell you over coffee. In the same break room where he was once mocked, he told her everything. He told her about the life he'd left behind, the promise he'd made to his wife to keep Rosie safe, and the crushing weight of his hidden past. She didn't flinch. She didn't recoil in fear. She listened with an empathy that reached past the soldier and saw the father, the widower, the hero. She reached across the table and took his hand. You're the strongest man I've ever met, she whispered. And Rosie was right all along. Her dad is a superhero. The transformation at Innovatech was immediate. The man in the janitor's uniform was replaced by a man in a perfectly tailored suit, but the quiet humility remained. He moved with a new purpose, his eyes missing nothing. The whispers that followed him now were not of mockery, but of awe and respect. He redesigned the entire security protocol, not with brute force, but with intelligent, preventative systems that made everyone feel safer. He treated every employee, from the executives to the new cleaning crew, with the same quiet dignity. One afternoon, he was walking the lobby with Serafina, their hands intertwined, when they passed the spot where Brent had humiliated him. Rosie, there for her daily after-school visit, ran up and hugged his legs. Daddy, can we build a real star hopper one day? She asked, looking up at him with adoring eyes. Kaelen scooped her into his arms, his love for her a physical presence, a shield against all the darkness in the world. He kissed her forehead and looked at Serafina, his stormy gray eyes filled with a peace she had never seen before. I think, he said, his voice full of promise, we're already building something even better. He had found his place. It wasn't scrubbing floors, and it wasn't on a battlefield. It was here, with his daughter in his arms and a woman he was beginning to love by his side, a protector in plain sight. So, the next time you see someone the world has written off, someone you're tempted to dismiss, maybe ask yourself, what battles have they fought that you know nothing about? What hidden strengths are they keeping in reserve, waiting for the moment they are needed most? Share your stories of hidden heroes and single parents who do it all. You never know who you might inspire.